everyone, Dani here, and welcome to Spenelli Speaks and another Sunday evening with Edward Rutherfurd's London. If you are new here, I am going through as a reread and summarizing each chapter for those of you who may want to read this book but feel a little overwhelmed by its contents. It is quite a hefty read, and as you can tell, I am very invested. These are from the first time I read. This is the second time. Having a great time doing so. So if you have been following along, you'll know that we are up to chapter 9, which is London Bridge, kind of a hefty chapter. And if you, like I said, are just joining us and you want to catch up, there is a playlist in the description, so feel free to jump into that. As we are reading in real time, this will bring us right into Thanksgiving, so it should be the Sunday right before Thanksgiving here in 2025. But if you're watching this in replay, like I said, you have that full playlist available in the description. That all being said, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that we can talk about the book as well as making sure that you are notified when the new videos pop up. They are every Sunday at 6, and they will bring us, like I said, right to Thanksgiving. I am contemplating perhaps doing a live discussion at the very end, but let me know in the comments, would that be something you're interested in if at the end of us reading, so maybe the week after Thanksgiving, we have a live discussion and just like talk about whatever we want to talk about in that discussion? Let me know in the comments. But anyways, back to chapter 9, again, London Bridge. Our time frame here is a little bit of a span of time. So we start in 1357, which is about 62 years after the last chapter. And it spans to about 1422. So we have a chunk of years. So we see some of our characters grow up. We see some of our characters kind of go through different things. But we have 1357 to 1422. And at this time, physically, the London Bridge looks way different than it does today. So if you've ever seen London Bridge, and many people think that the Tower Bridge is London Bridge, I'll insert a picture here. Tower Bridge is the beautiful display. It's like white and like teal colored. It's got big towers and it's beautiful. A lot of people think that is London Bridge. It is not. London Bridge today is probably one of the most nondescript bridges that London has at this time. It's just a gray bridge. It's a cement bridge that just goes from one side of the Thames to the other. I mean, one of the side of the parts. And it's just a bridge. That being said, it has had its moments throughout history. It's burned down a couple times. It's had its moments. But in the time frame that we're discussing, it was the focal point of London, if not England, was London Bridge. There were homes. There was the Church of Thomas Becket. Marketplaces. It was a big deal. It was a very large bridge. People lived on the bridge. People worked on the bridge. People had sold goods on the bridge. It had tolls on the bridge. So it was it was a place of commerce. It was a big deal. And we find a lot of our characters here on the bridge. First and foremost, Gilbert Bull. So he lives on the bridge. He is an alderman, I believe, and he has a place of status and lives on the bridge. He has his wife, and then he has a daughter, Tiffany, who is coming of age into into the marriage realm. She's 11. Anywho, so we have Gilbert and Tiffany. That's that Bull descendant line. We also meet Geoffrey Duckett, who we meet as a babe in this the beginning of this chapter, because Gilbert Bull and Joffrey. It's Joffrey, because I think it's not Geoffrey Chaucer, it's Joffrey Chaucer, right? Chaucer. Most people just say Chaucer, but I think it's Joffrey Chaucer. So I guess Duckett's name would have been Joffrey. I'm listening to it on audio. I don't quite remember how he pronounced it, because the rest of the time it's just Duckett. Well, however you would like to say it, he is named then for Chaucer, because they just find him by the side of the river. During this time, there was the plague. So the plague hits England, and specifically London, several times. So 1348, we had Black Plague, again in 1361, again in 1400, which is what ultimately takes Chaucer in the end. So they find him as a babe. You may question, like, well, how do they know it was a Ducket then? Well, Chaucer asks around and finds out it was a Duckett's. It was a Ducket. And then as he grows, we know as readers, he has the white tuft and the webbing. So he comes in as a babe. Bull takes him in and kind of raises him, not as a son, but as a foster child, because he kind of has a kinship with Tiffany as they grow up too. He's a little bit older than Tiffany, but you see there's a little bit of a kinship there. We meet Dame Barnacle, who is the fiercest, strongest woman, I swear, in this whole book. She owns a brewery, tavern, that she basically inherited from her first husband. She's been married 3 times. She'll be married 3 times in this particular section. Her first husband, she was married at, I believe they said 11, widowed at 13, took ownership of the bar, married again to John Fleming. So as you can hear all these names, we're having a lot of the family trees from the beginning, from our timelines, pop up. And they had a daughter, Amy. And we meet Amy again, and she's also 11. So Tiffany and Amy, both 11-year-olds, Bull and Barnacle / Fleming, are 11, and they are ready to get married. My goodness. So we see again Fleming, and Amy is very interested in a young man named Ben Carpenter. So if we remember Carpenter line is that Osric line. So Osric from the chapter The Tower. So if you're following, a little side note, anytime you're in a chapter, I would just, if you have the physical book, go back to that timeline and just look who everyone is, because it's very helpful. For me, I pick up all the names right away so I know who everyone is, but I've read this before. So anywho, we have James Bull, who is Gilbert Bull's nephew, but he is coming out from Bocton. If you recall, Bocton is in the Bull line and a very cherished land. And he wants to marry Tiffany so that they can kind of keep the money in the family, essentially. That's his theory. And then lastly, we have Benedict Silversleeves, because of course every chapter we need to include a Silversleeves. And like every other chapter, not well liked. I mean, by the reader. We know he's slimy, he's skeezy. Gilbert Bull absolutely adores him. He wants him to marry his daughter Tiffany. He seems like he's well-to-do, but in the background we know that he is bad news bears for sure. So a lot of characters in this particular chapter, but let's pause on them for a moment and just understand what's happening historically. So for a lot of time in the last couple of years, England's been doing really well. They have been fighting with France. They have been taking land. They have been just bringing in the money from all of these wars, and France has really been paying that price. It's been so good that they haven't even had to require taxes from their own people. And we see a lot of this is done by what they're calling the Black Prince. But slowly it starts to decline, right? Because, you know, what is good sometimes has to come down, right? So it starts to decline, and France, you know, it gets back most of what was taken, and the money is gone. Taxes are up. and England's not faring so well as far as their tax situation to their people. They institute a poll tax that for the first time is also goes to the peasants. So people who never had to pay taxes before are now having to pay per head. And a lot of them, like, they have kids, they have dependents, they have all these people in their house, and they have to pay per head. So it's noted that when this was occurring, people would just disappear. Like, you could not, like, at one time there was 15 people living in this house, and now there's one. So it's a way in which people had to kind of subvert getting taxed, because there was no money. How could they pay taxes? They've never had to do that before, and they're already poor. So you see a lot of revolt. There was the Great Peasant Revolt in 1381 against these poll taxes. And then more specifically, there was what was called the Good Parliament, which basically, like, exiled or excommunicated a lot of people that were getting, like, they were getting paid. They were like liaisons. One was a mistress. It was just people who shouldn't be getting government money, that were just like being, like, their stuff was being paid for, their like their nice clothes and their food and their lodging, and that's taxpayers' money, not, and it shouldn't be going to random people. So the Good Parliament kind of like weeded all this stuff out, basically called out the crown and was like, you're doing this, this, and this, and did a lot of that. And it came back around, and then there was like the Bad Parliament. So historically, this is a very feather ruffling time where the crown and the people are they're just clashing because the taxes are getting outrageous. It's not right. It shouldn't be the way that it is. So you see a lot of people revolting. You see people from the country coming into London and ransacking. You have some people, John Ball comes in and kind of has a whole platform about how all men are created equal. So there shouldn't be this hierarchy of, like, the aristocrats and noblemen and then serf and peasant life. So a lot of that's going away. Serfdom is, like, heading out the door. We even see John Wycliffe, if you've heard that name. He's out of Oxford, and he starts to dabble in translating the Bible from Latin to, like, Middle English, Old English. What we see is what that looks like today. Even Geoffrey Chaucer, I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. I had a whole class, and now I can't remember if I feel like it's Joffrey. Like, that sounds right to me, but I could just being weird. Anywho, it doesn't matter. I digress. He wrote a lot of his, including his Canterbury Tales, in Old or Middle English. And if you've ever seen that, there's like an E at the end of every single word. So the word, like, old, O-L-D, used to be spelled O-L-D-E, and it was pronounced not old, but olda. So there's just the at the end of, like, everything. I hated having to read that in that class. But anywho, again, I digress. So let's go back to our fictional characters, because that's what's more fun, right? So, like I said, Amy, who is Dame Barnacle's daughter, and Tiffany, who is Gilbert Bull's daughter, are both in marrying age, and they're both looking for suitors. Tiffany, she is the daughter of an alderman. She lives on London Bridge. She is rich, so to speak. She's got a lot of suitors. So we have James Bull, her cousin. We have Silver Sleeves, who seems like he is a well-to-do, very educated individual. As a reader, we know that's not true. And then we have Ducat. So Joffrey Ducat, who she kind of grew up with, she's kind of, like, interested in. He's kind of like, whatever. Like, he has no, like, pull towards anyone, but in her mind, she's got 3 suitors. Ducat, Bull, and Silver Sleeves. There's a couple others, like, on the wings, but they're really not involved in the story as much, so we're not going to focus on them. Then we have Amy, who essentially has 2 suitors. She is Dame Barnacle's daughter, and they work. They're regular people, so to speak. So she has this Ben Carpenter, who she is really interested in. However, her mother wants her to marry Ducat because Ducat is very motivated. He is an apprentice for her husband, John Fleming, who is a grocer. The Grocers Guild is very, very prosperous at this time. You have the Mercers. So these are all merchants and people who do trades, and there's all guilds. And to be a part of the guild is kind of like, if you think about it, like our workers' unions, right? They take care of each other and they make sure that the cost of goods are good for everyone, right? But then you kind of can control, like if you have a good in with somebody, like if a certain guild needs something from your guild, you like can do trade agreements and stuff that could either help each other or hurt each other. So it's very political, so to speak, within and without the guilds. So he is an apprentice with John Fleming, a grocer who seemingly is well-to-do, like has a brain for it, but he's also he's like a philosopher, an astronomer. He thinks a lot about science. His head is in the stars, and he really becomes a victim of silver sleeves. And we find out that a lot of his savings has been diminished, if not taken completely, by silver sleeves based on alchemical findings. That's all I want to say. I don't want to give too much away, but it's unfortunate. And this comes to play because of this poll tax. So a lot of things that are happening create turmoil within the families. And a lot goes on. Like I said, this chapter is a little over 100 pages. So and it spans several years. That so much is going on. And it like compacts on top of each other as far as the taxes and the turmoil between the crown and the people. And then in the fictional sense, these people and who are the girls going to marry and who are they and are they good enough. A lot of stuff happens. Ducat is pretty much ousted a lot because it's suggested that he's a thief, which we know he is not. It's suggested that he's a rebel, which we know he is not. And like nobody believes him because he's just a babe when they find him. So he has no moral compass, right? Which is silly because he was raised by Bull. So Bull should feel like, yeah, but Bull is his like worst champion. He like does not back him up ever, which is so frustrating because Ducat is probably the best person in this chapter because he just stays true to himself and his responsibilities, and he takes accountability for a lot. And it just, anywho, this is why Ducats are my favorite family, because they just are always so good. Anywho, so with London Bridge, we again see how that plays into all of this. And we also find out who marries who. There are some deaths that happen and some marriages, more than you would expect. So that's very nice. There is a description of how one obtains a coat of arms. So if you've ever been interested in that, that was an interesting little excerpt with Ducat. So that was very interesting. And all in all, it was a very good chapter. I felt like it was going to be longer. I thought it was like 150 pages, but like I said, it was more like just over 100 pages. And it reads very quickly because this chapter was very submersive into these fictional characters, whereas some chapters do get a little bit more submersive in the historical references. So I thought this had a very good melding of the two and kept you like involved, because though it may be overwhelming that there are so many characters in this chapter, it really kept rolling because you were really shifting between all of them and what they are all doing and how they interconnected with one another. So like I said, all in all, historical side, a lot of clashing with the taxes and what to do about that and what Parliament when they hold a parliament, what they did about it. And then fictional wise was really just like who's going to marry who, how is that going to go down, who likes who, and who's going to end up with who. And yeah, so anywho, that's the chapter. That is London Bridge. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, if I missed something, or if you want to discuss something more, please jump it down into the comments. I would be more than happy to discuss that with you. If not, we will jump into next week on Sunday with chapter 9, which is Hampton Court. So I do believe we get to see Henry VIII finally. And I can tell you it's not in a good light, but did we expect any less? So until then, I hope you are reading something fantastic. I hope you are taking care, staying safe, and as always, you know how it goes. Happy reading. Bye.